Welcome to our first Friends of Manchester meeting for 2024. So we're happy to have you here, and we will have we have a speaker. Yeah, we have a speaker. He's here, Blake Moore. But before I turn it over to him, if you didn't get one of our little program lists from before, there's a little stack of these gold and black slips that lists our upcoming February, March, April, and May meetings. So you're welcome to take that home with you. And Blake Moore is our presenter tonight, which is a little bit different from what we posted. Brandy, she's the director of admissions, but that's okay. He works in the admissions department. So he'll be able to explain how all that works, and he'll be available, I'm sure, or we can have some questions if you have questions for him that he can answer, either during or after. All right. I believe that's what I wanted to say to get this thing started. So Blake Moore, take it away.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. As we said, my name is Blake Moore. I'm going to take that down just a little bit. That's a little out there. Okay. As we said, my name is Blake Moore. I work in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at Manchester University. So I work here at the North Manchester campus. As we talk tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about what Manchester University Admissions does, what we do throughout the year, and how we are actively recruiting the next generation of Manchester University students. But before I dive in, I just want to make sure that I share tonight and express my gratitude to all of you, being many friends of Manchester, alums, former faculty and staff, and just how much you're keeping Manchester's spirit alive outside of our campus and outside of our walls. It's definitely a treat to be here tonight, and I'm really looking forward to sharing what Manchester University is doing right now. So to get started, I just want to introduce myself a little bit more so I can share my perspective with you of where I am and what I do for the university. Officially, my title is the Admissions Operations and Slate Manager in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. That's quite the mouthful, isn't it? So usually we just go with Operations Manager. It's a pretty fancy title, which just means that my role is really behind the scenes work with our admissions team. We have 12 full-time staff members in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. We also have 4 individuals that work in our graduate admissions office over in Fort Wayne. We'll talk a little bit more about that structure here in just a second. But my role largely is to help with the technology of the office. So Slate, as in my title, is a database for all of our student information. So our students will apply to the university, they'll sign up for campus visits, they'll fill out different forms to enroll at Manchester. All of those forms start with me and my work. So I build all of those forms, all of those websites so that our students are able to move through the admissions process. And then I help our counselors ensure that our students are able to make their way towards Manchester and enroll as a student. So that's largely what my work entails, but as at Manchester with many other individuals, I wear a lot of different hats. So in addition to that, I help manage our office inventory. I help with meeting with visitors while they're on campus, so I get a little bit of face-to-face time with our students. And also, most recently, I am now an adjunct professor at Manchester as well in our sport management department. So I just added that credential this January. So I'm going to be starting in the classroom in a couple of weeks. Really excited about that. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually going to be transitioning out of admissions, and I'm going to be a full-time faculty member starting in August. So I'll be a full-time professor. Really excited about that. A little bit about my academic history. I'm a Manchester alum as well, as many of you are. I graduated in 2018. I have 2 degrees in sport management and communication studies. And then I wrapped up my master's degree at Grace College in 2022. So I'm looking forward to continuing that education later on, getting a doctorate so that way I can teach and teach without borders in terms of what business classes I can teach to our students in the future. So a little bit about my professional career, kind of how I got to where I am. I actually left Manchester and worked in college athletics for a little while, so that's where my background is, and that's why sport management is so important to me. And then I found my way back to the undergraduate admissions office, and I've been there for 4.5 years. So I've done a variety of different roles. I started out as an admissions counselor. I then moved to the operations side, and now I am in my current role. I was promoted last April to that position. And a little bit about just some fun things outside of campus. I'm heavily involved in sports, of course, because that's my background. I coach youth soccer in the community with Manchester Soccer Club, so I coach our junior high folks. We just finished up our season in October, and I also do some public address announcing for our university. So I announce for our soccer teams, our wrestling teams, volleyball, and our track program. So many of you might know Ray Hedstrom. I know that he lives in your community. Ray does football and basketball, so we kind of tag team and get all of the sports covered at Manchester. So, but that's just a little bit about me. So hopefully that can give you kind of an understanding then of what I'm going to be talking about in terms of our admissions crew and what we do at the university. So a little bit about admissions. As I mentioned, we have both an undergraduate recruiting team. So that is for students who are looking to go to college for the very first time, or they are transferring to finish their bachelor's degree. So these are students that are very young in their college career. They're trying to finish that first degree. The graduate folks then are helping with our graduate programs primarily in the health sciences. So as many of you know, we have an athletic training program and a pharmacy program. That's what they are working with. So these are graduate and professional individuals who are a little bit more advanced in their careers. Maybe they have children or family members, and so they are working with them. It's kind of a unique system to have these 2 campuses and to have 2 teams working together. But as I mentioned earlier, we do have 11 full-time members and now 1 part-time member to the undergraduate admissions team. We also have a couple of student leaders. And then on the graduate side, we have 4 full-time staff members. So one of the big things to know about admissions in terms of our work is how our work is split up. And we talk about it in 2 ways. We talk about the recruitment side and we talk about the operations side. So operations is me. That's what I do, right? So the technology, the behind the scenes things, we're the people that make things go. We're the people that create policies and procedures for the university. And we're the ones that are trying to help our recruiters. So most of you are probably more familiar with the recruitment side, and that's what an admissions counselor is and what they do. They are the people that are engaging with students. They're the ones that are going into high schools and trying to connect with those students to encourage them to get to Manchester. That is their role. So they are out and about on the road. Of our 11 full-time employees in the undergraduate admissions team, 6 of those individuals are full-time recruiting. That's all they do. Their job is to sell Manchester and get those students in. On the graduate side, a lot of them have mixed responsibilities, but each one of them typically oversees an academic program. So one might recruit the pharmacy students, one might recruit the athletic training students, so on and so forth, okay? So that is their job, and that is their responsibility. So in recruitment and operations, I tried to break it out just so that that way you could all see what some of those job titles are and what some of us do. So as I mentioned in the recruitment side, that's where Brandy, our director of admissions, really started out as. She kind of worked her way up into that director role from that side. We have an associate director, and then we have those admissions counselors. One other piece to our office that I'd be remiss to not talk about is our Spartan ambassadors. So on campus, we have 40 students who are committed to working with our office every day to help recruit those new students. And those individuals will write postcards, they will give tours to students when they're on campus. They're the ones that are our spotlight students, right? Those are those top-end students that we want connecting with those future Spartans out there. Any questions so far? Okay. So, talking a little bit more about what we do. What does admissions actually look like? What does our day-to-day look like? We always say in admissions, there's no normal day, right? We do a lot of different things and we get stretched a lot of different directions in our jobs. But when we talk about admissions, we talk about things in a cycle. We start a cycle with an incoming class of seniors in high school, and we end when they enroll in college. And then we start that cycle again, and then again, right? It's a never-ending cycle. So when we talk about recruitment, there are 3 levels to this. The first is our travel season. So that is usually during the fall semester, and that's when all of our counselors are out on the road engaging with new students. So it used to be that students would maybe go to houses and talk individually to students and their families, but now it's more about going to their high schools, right? Connecting with their school counselors, getting to talk to those students face to face, and asking and making sure that we answer their questions so that that way they are motivated to apply and move forward with Manchester. So this year, as a matter of fact, between August and early November, it's about 15 weeks of travel that our counselors go on. We have some that travel all the time. They're on the road 4 days a week. We never see them. We have some that travel part-time. So they travel half the day and then they're back in the office. But at the end of this year, we actually had 307 events that we attended in our office. There's a lot of mileage there on cars. With our events, we go to all of the high schools north of Indianapolis and any college fair that is in the state of Indiana. And we also do some in Ohio and Michigan as well that we can get to. So our goal is to get there and to really spread the word about Manchester. At Manchester, we also are a member of what is called INACAC. It's a really big acronym, but it's our state's college admissions counseling group. So we have a professional organization and they put on college fairs for us. So that is included in the total. So we have those usually in Indianapolis or Evansville or Fort Wayne, places where we're going to see a lot of students. Also, we reached about 4,800 students while we were on the road this year. That's a lot compared to what we have seen in the past. We had a huge upgrade in all of our engagement with our students this year while out on the road. So that's a really big positive for Manchester. And these aren't just seniors. These are juniors and sophomores in high school who are really starting that college search process. Even saying one thing to that student might bring them to Manchester in the future. That's our ultimate goal when we're out there. It's not about trying to get them to commit right on the spot. It's striking up a conversation. Hey, how are you? What do you need to know about going to college? Maybe answering one question will get them excited and they might remember us. They might make us stand out from all the other schools that they're going to see throughout the year. In addition to our travel season, we then start the financial aid season. And boy, is this a busy time of year for us. We start in late October to March, reviewing all of our student applications and starting to review their financial aid. So we start with applications and start reviewing those on September 1st. We have an agreement with all the other colleges and universities in the state that we will start reviewing those on September 1st. And we will do that so that that way everybody can start fresh at the same time. That's a gentleman's agreement, if you will, right? It's not a formal written contract. It's just an agreement we've come to. So we start that conversation in September and start admitting students. At Manchester, one of the unique things for us is that we, on average, will tell students once they have finished their application within 1 week, whether they have been admitted to Manchester or not. A lot of universities, you might have to wait. At large institutions, Purdue's, your IUs, maybe some of your other bigger state schools, they might not release decisions until later in the year, and they might do it all at once. At Manchester, we try to let our students know right away so that they have that decision to make. In addition to that, we talk about financial aid a lot in the admissions office. This is kind of unique. At other schools, admissions counselors aren't necessarily always trained on how to talk about financial aid to their students. Usually they leave that for the financial aid office. But our team is trained to do that, and we engage with students to talk about cost. What is the value of attending a college? And that's a conversation we've had to have more and more, right? College education is getting a little bit more expensive, and we need to talk about what's the value of going to Manchester. Many of you know that, right? There's a big value to that, but students may not see that. They might just see a dollar amount and say, no, I'm not interested anymore. That may not always be the case, but that happens. So one of the biggest things that we're facing right now in admissions is a big change in financial aid. There is a file called the FAFSA. Some of you might be familiar with this. It's an application that students file to get federal student aid or state aid. And unfortunately, that file was not available in October like it normally is. Usually it's open then. It was not open until December 31st this year. They've changed some things on it, and that created a lot of panic with our students. So we have seen a shift in what our timeline traditionally looks like. So right now we're working through that. The financial aid is now flowing. It is starting. Students are able to file. We just found out that yesterday over 1 million students have filed nationwide for financial aid. And that's in 9 days. That's because of how eager students are to learn about financial aid, but they were put on pause for 2 months. So us in admissions, we've had to really adapt to what's been going on. The final stage then is the enrollment season and summer. So when we talk about enrolling students in March, we start having students complete their steps to enroll officially in classes. At that time, that's when we finally start getting really confirmed students that are serious about attending Manchester. They've seen their financial aid, they've talked it over with their parents, they're ready to put in a deposit and start their admissions journey and now to become a student at Manchester. So we traditionally start that in March. Students go through a series of steps. So right now they do have to pay $100 to secure their spot. There's also a couple of forms that they have to complete for us to then make sure that we place them in the correct classes. It is largely based on their academic area of interest. I know the last time that you had a guest, you had the success advising team. They were here. They're the ones that put together that student schedule so that way they know they're in the right classes and they can start their journey in the right direction. Make sure they have those classes to make sure they graduate in 4 years. So the other big thing for us during the summer is orientation. Some of you might drive by campus in the middle of June and see a big commotion on campus. That's because we have what's called our Black and Gold Day. Black and Gold Day is our student orientation. We usually are welcoming somewhere in the ballpark of 250 students to campus to get them oriented, to teach them about what they need to know as a student, to get them connected with people they're going to care about when they come to Manchester. So we talk about the admissions cycle in that way. And it also gets confusing because sometimes you're working in 2 cycles at the same time, right? You're working with juniors as they're getting ready to start their senior journey, starting that application. So it's a never-ending circle for us in admissions. The last big thing that I want to talk about is just kind of what some of our roles are, right? So you might wonder what ultimately our goals are or what our jobs entail. This is more on the recruitment side. So right, the biggest thing for us is that we're out there to sell Manchester, right? And I put sell in quotation marks, right? Our jobs as counselors, and for some of us, we take that very seriously. I know that that's how I was, right? I can sell you Manchester all day, right? I can try to get you to come. But at the end of the day, my goal is to make sure that you're making a good decision for yourself. Is Manchester a good fit? Can you get to the right places that you want to go through here? So we do that in a number of ways. We talked about off-campus travel, but we have on-campus visits too, and a lot of them. Last calendar year in 2023, we had 1,800 individuals that visited campus. That's in group visits, that's individual visits. We do all kinds of different things to try to draw and attract students. And it's not just sign up when you can, right? We send out actively trying to solicit those students to come to campus. Hey, we've got this event coming up. It would be great to have you. And then we draw them in that way. And we do unique visits, right? So maybe a student's interested in the College of Business, or they're interested in the health sciences. We hold special events for them in that way. As technology improves, we also are starting to reach out to students in different ways. We have people in our office that will tell us the stories of when they had to call every student. But now we're not just dealing with phone calls, we're dealing with emails. We're dealing with text messages to students. We can go right to them, instantly message them, and text them, down and back, and we can have a full conversation in 15 minutes. Also, social media, right? We have a social media account for our admissions office and our admissions teams. We also have to monitor that because students end up sending us messages through there to get connected with us, and we have to answer questions in all different formats. We talked about the student database. One of the other big things that we do is process applications. Every year we're processing between about 2,000 to 2,500 applications. Those are just applications that get completed. There are more applications that are out there that students start, but they don't ever finish, right? Because maybe they find another school that they're interested in. It's a lot of outreach to do. And that's just on the undergrad side. The graduate side processes a bunch more as well. And we all do that in our offices each day. We've talked about some other things here. We the major campus events, Black and Gold Day. We talked about orientation, but we also hold special events. One of them is coming up this weekend. We are holding a regional DECA competition. DECA is a high school organization that focuses on business development and students who are interested in business careers. It's a career competition. They come in, they get a prompt about business or sport management or marketing, and they have to create a proposal about how they might address that situation. We judge them, they get awards, but that could bring easily 250 to 300 students to campus, all from the Northeast Indiana region. So even though that's not our event, that's the College of Business event, we help them out with that. And I think the most important thing for me is the bottom, right? Our job is to ultimately mentor students and families. It's not about just selling the university, it's about selling higher education and what the value of that is, right? We all know and understand that higher education opens doors for students and their potential futures. And so ultimately, we have to have those conversations, and sometimes students don't see that until they have that conversation with us. All right, so I've shared a little bit about admissions. I have some other things that I want to share, just some changes that have happened on campus and other information that we tend to share with our students. But does anyone have any questions right now that I can address? Yes, start here.
I'm just interested, you say you get back to them, after they apply, you get back to them very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of criteria do you have to make the judgment as to whether they are going to get into Manchester?
Yes.
Because I assume that's what happens at that point.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct. So when we are looking at their application, we require students to have a minimum GPA of a 2.5. That is their requirement from high schools. We also look at their discipline, their attendance record from high school. We look at essay questions or short answer questions that are provided on their application to ensure that their writing is applicable. And we also tend to look at their grade trends, right? We want to make sure that even if they do have a 2.5, we want to make sure that we're seeing progress. We don't want to see that student drop off at the end as they get ready to go to their senior year. One decision that we did make at Manchester is that we no longer require standardized testing scores. So no SATs or ACTs are required. That was a decision that was made while I was in school, and that has been the same since. Other universities have kind of wavered with COVID Some ended up taking that requirement away and then adding it back. At Manchester, it's been consistent, I believe, since 2016 or 2017.
Do you look at SAT scores?
We don't, unless they provide them, and that's in very special circumstances. But we do not look at those scores.
What would keep a student from not being admitted?
So it would be either they don't meet the minimum GPA requirement, or if there is a serious conduct issue. So we have had serious conduct issues before where we've had to say no to a student. So we require them to answer questions about their discipline in school, as well as their criminal background, if you will. So we have asked questions about those. That is the two things that we're typically looking for.
Do you think you expect to get honest answers on those kind of questions?
We actually do. You would be very surprised at what people will open up about. We have students that will admit to their misgivings, their infractions that they have. And then we also have individuals that ultimately will maybe share some very personal details of their life as well that might have led to that. It's just very interesting to read applications in that regard. You had a question as well, sir?
How early in a high school student's career do you start making contact? Juniors, freshmen,
Yeah.
seventh graders?
Yeah, that's a great question. It seems like it's earlier and earlier for a lot of schools. Traditionally, we begin outreach the second semester of a junior year for students. That's when we really hit it hard. Now, that's not to say if a student reaches out to us or wants to visit during their freshman, sophomore year, earlier than that, we will absolutely welcome them to campus. We will answer their questions. But typically by the time they're a junior, students have more of a well-defined understanding of what they want to do and what they're starting to look for in a college. So I think that's usually where that starts. One other big reason that we're going to start doing that a little bit more aggressively is Manchester has just announced that we are doing what's called the early college experience. It is essentially students dual enrolling in their high school, and they're getting to come to the college campus and take college courses. So that is something that we have seen a growth in. We started this a couple of years ago. I believe my colleague said we're looking at about 7 or 8 enrolling for the spring semester from local high schools. So that number is continuing to climb. And even more the reason to start reaching out earlier and earlier.
What's unique about, I noticed that you have numerous students from the South. What's unique about trying to get students from the South?
Yeah, the hardest part is trying to ensure that this university is a good fit, particularly because our students that come from out of state, particularly as far south as you're indicating, are typically student athletes. The reason for that is the NCAA Division III does not have very many schools in the southern United States. If you look at a map, largely Division III exists in Indiana and the Midwest, and then the Northeast. So students that are not good enough to maybe compete at the Division I or Division II level, but maybe want to compete at Division III and still have the opportunity to play college sports, they might look for a school in our area. So other schools around us, Trine is one that has had students that have come from Florida or Georgia to play on their football team. Same thing has happened with our student athletes. Now, I won't say that's all of them, but that's where a good portion of those students are coming from.
Are you doing any special outreach to Church of the Brethren students? Any particular program that trying to get them enrolled in Manchester or Church of the Brethren school?
Yeah, so this last year we went to a couple of the Church of the Brethren events. Those were, we attended one. We actually had a Church of the Brethren individual that worked in our office, Noah Van Horn. He traveled and went to one of those events. It was one of the youth retreats, youth events. So he was there for the entire duration of that. I believe there was us and maybe Juniata or another Brethren school in attendance to that. We also have some outreach through our alumni office as well. Megan Sarber is in our alumni office, and she's done some coordination there. The rest of that is typically done by Kim Reinl. If you're a member of the Church of the Brethren, you might know Kim. So she has done some work with that in the past as well. So good question. I can't go in any deeper because largely that's her role, but yes,
So
we
there
do some.
haven't been any special days for Church of the Brethren students to come to campus?
Not visit,
Like that for something else?
right, not visit days,
Not visiting, okay.
correct. You had your hand up as well?
I under faculty, what's the faculty role in recruitment? I know probably the coaching, the athletic,
Mm-hmm.
they would try to recruit from a little different perspective.
Yeah.
But if you're a business faculty member or a math faculty member,
Mhm.
do you get involved in what's that for?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually something that we've tried to enhance on campus over the last few years. One of the biggest changes that's happened in our admissions office over the last couple of years is that we went from what we would call territorial recruiting or demographic recruiting to academic recruiting. So what that is traditionally colleges and universities recruit students based on where they are from. So they will identify an area, a geographic territory that their admissions counselors will work with. So for me, when I first started at Manchester, I worked with students if they lived in South Bend, east over to Angola, and anybody that was in the state of Michigan. Those were my students. Regardless of who they were, those were my students. But we have since switched to now work with students based on what they're interested in studying. So if a student is interested in the health sciences, they work with my colleague Jacob because Jacob has become kind of our resident expert in those programs. He's worked with those academic faculty members to come up with plans. So certain faculty members are more involved than others, of course, but some of the basic things that we have them do, we have a list of faculty ambassadors. So these are individuals that have volunteered themselves to help with the recruitment. So they might send postcards to students or email. I've even set some of them up with texting students via our Slate system. It's not their personal numbers, so not anything personal there. But they reach out to them as they get admitted, as they commit to the university. We've also had individuals, faculty members, excuse me, that have set up academic days. So College of Business is a good example. Heather Toomey, who's the dean of the College of Business, she helps coordinate and put together an event that is specific for students that are interested in the College of Business, and they do that in the fall and the spring. The other way that many of them get involved is they meet with individuals while they're on campus. When we sign a student up for a visit, we ask them, do you want to meet with a faculty member? Do you want to meet with athletics? Do you want to meet with someone from music or honors or other places on campus? If a student marks yes, our administrative assistant, Jill, will reach out to those professors and say, hey, there's a student interested in your area. Can you meet with them? And usually it's a 30-minute session talking with the student about what the academic program is, what they might be interested in, and trying to encourage them to come to Manchester. So there are a lot of ways that we have kind of enhanced those relationships, especially as we've moved into this academic recruiting era in admissions. Yes.
You have, as you indicated earlier, about 40 students, Manchester students that work with you.
Yes.
How much are those involved in individual student, high school student? That is a continuing conversation, either email or texting. Do you have that kind of program so that somebody can get a personal relationship beginning to develop with a high school, with a college student while they're being recruited?
Yes. So that is a subgroup of that 40. That they are called Student Outreach Specialists, or SOS for short. Yeah, we love acronyms, don't we? So SOS. These individuals are trained to do texting and email for students. They handwrite postcards to these students. We also try to build a relationship with their tour guides. They're Spartan ambassadors that give their tours. We will have them follow up with a handwritten card saying, thank you for coming. It was great to connect with you. We also make sure that each student walks away with a business card of a Spartan ambassador. So not only can we build that connection with that postcard, we can also say, if you have questions that are directed to me, I will answer them for you. So we try to be able to incorporate that. And then at the end of the year, traditionally, we have students that help us to ensure that those students are ready to enroll, right? If we have a trouble reaching out to a student, sometimes it takes a second or a third person to reach out to that individual to get them to respond. Trust me, admissions counselors, they're the last ones that we want to hear from sometimes. They want to hear from the coaches, they want to hear from the students, they want to hear from the faculty, right? So bouncing off that second, third, fourth person, that might get them to move, might get them to do something for us. Any other questions? Yeah.
I don't know whether you had this information off the top of your head, but what percentage of students who are accepted to Manchester University end up enrolling and also it's probably too soon yet to know what your fall new student count is.
Yeah, it's a good question. Excuse me. So I can tell you what we call yield, that's what you're referring to, is how many students actually come versus how many apply. And I can tell you that from a visit perspective. Usually it's about somewhere in the ballpark of 25% to a third of the students that actually visit campus and are admitted will actually enroll at Manchester. That is for first year students. As far as the total pile, I couldn't tell you right offhand. I'd have to do some metrics in the system. But as far as fall enrollment goes, things are looking pretty good and pretty promising right now, I will say that. We actually had 2 students return to Manchester and a non-degree seeking student, so they're there to take a class, enroll for January, already have them in the count. We'll have a few for the spring semester in the middle of the year. And then for the fall, we can only project at this point, but hopefully we'll be around that 300 mark. That's kind of the goal area for us at the end of this academic or this recruiting cycle. That is undergraduate specifically. Graduate has their own metrics, and that is because they have certain caps to their programs. So, for example, I believe our cap for pharmacy is somewhere in the ballpark of 70 students. We can only take that many based on size and the facilities that we have. Yeah.
You described a variety of ways you have of contacting and evaluating students, including visits, on-campus visits, to schools, contact with counselors, and grades. But what method do you have of evaluating the tools you are actually using, how effective they are in reaching students? What are your resources for evaluating those tools and deciding which ones to try and use?
Yes, that's a great question. So Slate, which is the platform that I work with and that I manage, has a series of metrics, especially for outreach. So every email that we send or every mass messaging that we do, we have a success rate of how many messages actually went through. There will be some that bounce because of bad emails or other things. We have an open rate for emails, so I can see how many students actually opened the actual document. We can have click rates. So if you click on a link in an email, I know how many clicks there have been. And we can determine all of that from that particular system. We also have the ability to know if a student has opened an email multiple times. So we can make sure that they know that they have that information. There's a lot of technology behind it. There's a lot of metrics. It's a lot of the stuff that kind of goes over my head, but it is provided to us. I would show you one, but I wouldn't want to ensure the privacy of everyone's data in the system. But it is very cool. We can see all of that exchange. Also, we have a series of things at the end of the year that we will evaluate and assess, like students' engagement with us. So if a student has interacted with us within the last month, they are more likely to continue on and enroll. If a student has dropped off, they have stopped messaging us, they have stopped engaging with us, we know how likely they are to unenroll from the university. So there are a lot of metrics behind the system, but I appreciate your question. There's a lot there.
What access do you have to what other schools are doing
Mm.
and find successful or not successful?
Yeah.
They use
Yeah, so when it comes to that, there are two things that we can do. We have some networks that are set up for admissions counseling where we can go to professional conferences. So INACAC, the organization I mentioned earlier, that is the College Admissions Counselor Group for Indiana, they have an organization, and we go to their annual convention, seminar, if you will. Usually they host it at one of the other institutions, and they have professional development, and typically we'll talk about what they have found success with. I attend a yearly meeting on Slate. There are over 4,000 people in the United States that go to that event that are Slate users. And so we bounce ideas off of each other. We also are a member of the Independent Colleges of Indiana, and they have a network of directors, admissions directors and VPs that talk and communicate. And so we know where they are at in their success. So for example, Manchester was doing really well with visits this year overall, with the number of students that are coming to campus compared to past years. We found out earlier this year that other schools were seeing a little bit of a drop in their visits. So they will exchange data in that way as well.
I know that if the university is finding success in one particular process,
Mhm.
they might be reluctant to share that process.
Yeah.
Because their success, other people's success will deplete their
Right.
the original source of the information.
Yep. So sometimes we do have to go in stealth mode and try to get some information out of other universities. So some individuals might, and this goes for all admissions offices, they might sign up for a mailing list from another university, right? So then they can get the emails and the text messages that they would be sending their students to see if that's something that we want to adopt. So there is a little bit of an element of that as well, as you're saying. Yes.
Is there an intentional program with regard to the internet?
Yes, so international students, we do have a designated coordinator for that in our office. Her name is Kyle Grubb, so she is the international recruiter. International students have been a little bit of kind of back and forth over the last few years due to COVID specifically, and getting them here. It was a really difficult few years in terms of that. Last year, we did bring in 4 international students, 3 international transfers. So they started at another American institution, transferred to us. We also had one that was a international first year. He had actually studied in the United States and was very familiar with the university as well. So when those students come in through the system as international students, they apply through what is called the Common Application. They do that, and then all of their data goes to Kyle so that she can begin that recruitment process. International students do have extra criteria that they have to meet. They have to take an English exam in another country. They have to pass their national exam if their country has one. And then they also have to do a few other things regarding financial aid and assistance. Yeah.
Another one, just
Sure.
interested in, we've talked a lot about the student interaction.
Mhm.
What kind of interaction do you have with the parents of students?
Yeah.
Is there any kind of regular contact that way?
Mhm.
How often do they get to campus?
Sure.
What kind of help can they be?
Yep.
For their student, or you could be to them, through them to their student?
Yep. It's a great question. As we always talk about, talk to the people that are going to pay, right? And parents tend to be those people, right? So when it comes to the parents and the family members, we have a couple of things that we do. The first is we actually have what is called the Spartan Family Portal. It is an online website where students, parents, and family members can go online and they can get announcements on a regular basis from the university. Some of that content is generated directly by the admissions team. That is Kyle again. She's our expert in that. We also get some content from news articles. So if we have something really cool that happens at the university, their team, which is organization called Campus ESP. They're the ones that run this. They post that for us so that way the content goes out to family members and they see that regularly. So that's one way. We also have our own internal parent emails in Slate that we build as admissions team members to remind students' families about filing the FAFSA, about visiting campus, right? Because let's be honest, right? Students, sometimes it falls on deaf ears, right? They don't pay attention to all of the extra emails and data, but maybe their parents do, right? They might take that time to read those emails that we need to. So we do that through our team. Now you mentioned getting them to campus. The great news is that usually parents are with students about 90 to 95% of the time. We have very few that don't. We find this particularly important when a student is from out of state. That has become more and more a thing that we're trying to do in admissions. If they're coming from out of state, we need to get the parents involved. And typically that's because, again, they might be student athletes and they're looking at just the sports side. They may not be paying attention as much to the academics. So we want to make sure we have that conversation holistically with them about what admissions looks like. Yes, sir.
Can you explain the new frozen tuition program?
Yes, yes. So actually, I have a slide here that's got a few things on it about new things, but that is one of the newest things, is the tuition freeze. So what that is that when we're talking about financial aid, there are three big components. There is the tuition, there is room and board, which is the student's ability to live in a dorm and have a meal plan. And then the other piece, tuition, room and board, meal plan. Yeah, so that meal plan is that third piece, sorry. So all three of those things go together. Tuition is being frozen for students that are coming in for fall of 2024. So that biggest piece, it's usually about 3/4 of the cost, is that tuition is locked for students. When they come in, it will never change. Now, room and board and meal plan might, but the tuition piece will always remain the same. So that is going to be for their entire career at Manchester. So that is something that we just announced recently, and that's something that we're very excited about, that we're able to do that for students. So a few other big changes that have happened recently. Many of you have already met Dr. Stacy Young. She is our new president at Manchester. So she started back in July. A lot of great things that we've seen at the university with that transition. Another big thing that we're doing right now is we're doing some renovations in the Fort Wayne location. So for those of you that may not be aware, the second location is on the north side of Fort Wayne off of DuPont Road. And that is where all of our graduate students in the health sciences are studying. So our pharmacy students, our athletic training students, those that are in that health program. The reason that we are making that renovations is because of one of the other things that I posted on this slide is the doctorate of pharmacy or physical therapy, excuse me. Manchester University just got approved and accredited to offer a doctorate degree in physical therapy. That is a 2.5-year program for students, and that is brand new to the university. We will be enrolling our first class this summer, 2024. Because of that, the university is putting in a pro bono clinic for physical therapists. So individuals can come in from the community and actually get taken care of by our faculty and our students. So those renovations are started, and we're looking hopefully to have most of it done by the start of this upcoming academic year. A couple other things that we're doing right now that are really unique. The university's faculty just announced right before we went on holiday break that we now have a new transfer policy for students who have an associate's degree. If the student has an associate degree, so a 2-year degree from another college, we will take all of their credits. We will guarantee that those credits from that associate degree will come to the university. That's a really big step forward. There has been a lot of talk in the Indiana college community about doing this kind of a program. We are one of the very few that have actually gone out and announced that we were doing this. So we were one of the first. That's a big deal for us. We didn't see anything for the spring yet. It's a little late for transfers to come in the spring, but we would hope in the fall that we'll start to see some students take advantage of this program. The last thing down here is our new academic programs. So our doctorate of physical therapy, as I mentioned. We also have associate's degrees now in science. So associate of science is for students that are going on to like pharmacy school through us. They finish that 2-year associate degree and then they go right into the doctorate of pharmacy degree. Traditionally, pharmacists would have to take 8 years to go through that entire program. We can do it in 6 because of the way that we've done this. And they actually get an associate's degree. Before, they didn't get anything. They would just go straight and get their doctorate. But now they at least have an associate degree in case they may stop out. Maybe they don't finish their pharmacy degree. Maybe life gets in the way, something happens. They do have that 2-year degree. And we also have a couple of new minors that we're offering on campus that we just announced. We have an esports management program. Esports is competitive video gaming. I know that that may sound a little silly to many of you, but it is a growing industry, and we have people that are really interested in that. We have a team on campus, and they are very good. And so we wanted to be able to pair that up with an academic program. And we also are offering a minor in sports communication. That is not anything that I've been involved with in my transition to faculty, but it's a great addition for our students. So those are some of the big high point changes. I had some other slides here about just general information about the university, but other questions right now? Yes?
How do you help them with housing?
Yep, so housing for first-year students. So when a student comes to Manchester, I talked about those enrollment steps earlier, right? Those things they need to complete. One of the enrollment steps is a housing placement form. So we ask them a series of questions. What are you looking for in a residence hall? What are you looking for in a roommate? Do you like having your room clean or dirty? What time do you go to bed? All of those great questions, right? It's very important to know for a roommate, I think. So what we do then is we try to pair up a student with someone else based on those criteria, right? I don't like to call it this, but it's pretty much like having a dating profile, right? You're trying to be able to match somebody with someone else that's going to be a good fit for them. So the students can also request their roommate. So if they know somebody who they went to school with that's coming along, maybe it's their best friend from high school, you can request that and you can room with them. So with our housing, Manchester has a first-year residence hall. Many of you might be familiar with Garver Hall. Garver is our first-year residence hall. That's where all of our first-year students live together. We did that a few years ago. It's a retention thing, right? It's kind of senseless to put a first year with a senior because that senior might graduate. They might not be able to connect very well. They're with different friend groups. Doesn't help a lot. So we put all the freshmen together so that way they feel comfortable with one another. They're going through the same classes. They're going through the same things. And then hopefully they'll stick it out for those 4 years because of that. After that, the students are eligible to move to any of the other residence halls on campus. So right now, East, Hellman, and Oakwood are all available, as well as East Street Apartments. One thing that we did this year that's really cool is that all of our residence halls are going to be the same cost for students, no matter whether they're in a traditional residence hall or a suite style residence hall. A traditional style is 2 people per room. They share that room, and there's a community style bathroom down the hall that everyone uses. Whereas a suite style, there are 4 people that live in a shared space. There's 2 bedrooms, and they all share a restroom and facility. The reason for that is we want to make sure that we're not creating barriers for students, right? If you want to move to a suite style, a little bit nicer place, we don't want you to have to worry about the finances. We have had students that have expressed concerns about that, about paying more. So we've tried to eliminate that barrier by making them all consistent. So that's helped, and that's been a part of that tuition freeze we talked about earlier as well. Other questions? Other things I can answer for you while I'm here tonight? Yeah.
I had another Timbercrest resident ask me last week. He had wanted to be able to refer a couple of his grandchildren to give you the names so you might be able to contact them.
Sure.
How does that work? I invited him to come tonight, but I don't.
Yeah. It's a great question. So when we are collecting information for students, so just speaking more broadly, if you have friends, family members that might have children or students that are looking to go to college, traditionally what we need from that individual is we need their name and we need their email address. The email address is a requirement for our system to help with the outreach to the student, right? And obviously that's how our counselors can then engage with that student. So we just need that information to be collected, and it can always be sent to the admissions office. So I would be glad to collect that information from you tonight if you have it. But students can simply call into the university office or family members as well. Jill will probably pick up the phone. She's the administrative assistant in our office, and she'll be able to take down that information and plug it directly into our system. So it's a way for us to be able to start that conversation.
How has been the retention program of the athletes that you've been coming in from the South?
Good question. I don't have the statistics on that because that is all housed in success advising as part of their job. I do know that retention this year was pretty good overall within the university. But again, they have the metrics and I unfortunately don't. So, but that's a good, very good question. Anything else I can answer? I know we're getting close on time. I feel like I've talked a lot tonight, haven't I?
Well, I think, yes, Blake has provided a ton of information for us and answered our questions. So I think we'll bring this meeting to a close. Let's thank him for his attendance and his work here today.
Thank you. And just a quick comment, there are some items from Manchester back there on the table as you walk in. Feel free to grab any of those. Those are goodies we give away to our students as we're out recruiting and out on the road. And also, perhaps, maybe of interest to you all, the crest that you see back there is actually a fold out with information. So it's a nice little brochure. It gives you some fun facts about the university. It also has all of the academic programs that are offered at Manchester right now. So feel free to take one of those on your way out. And if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to stick around and answer anything. So I appreciate you all having us tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Blake. Our next meeting will be February the 13th, and scheduled presenter is Dr. Heather Schilling, and she's going to be talking about teacher education. She's the director of teaching education. And I know myself, I have a teaching license that I got. Of course, it's changed a lot in the 55 years or whatever it is, 50 years. So anyway, but that's our program for February the 13th. Here.